Hello, I'm Donna Rodriguez. Welcome to the State Senate Plymouth and Norfolk Candidate Forum. I want to take a moment to thank our candidates for participating in this forum and collaborating with us to bring informational programming to residents and voters this election season. I'm joined tonight by Zach Dolan. We're going to be acting as moderators for this forum. Let me explain the format. Tonight, the three candidates for State Senator for the Plymouth and Norfolk District, Stephen Gill, Katie McBride, and incumbent Patrick O'Connor will be participating. Each candidate will be introduced in alphabetical order to start. They'll have 2 minutes to introduce themselves, speak about who they are, why they're running for this office, as well as describing their qualifications for this position.
The candidates will then be asked a series of questions related to state, national, and local issues. For our viewers, we also offer background information about each issue for educational purposes. Our goal with these forums is to provide information that will be helpful for you in making informed decisions on Election Day. Candidates will be hearing the questions for the first time during this forum and will not receive coaching or information to assist in answering the questions. They will have 2 minutes to answer each question. The forum will close with each candidate having the opportunity to make closing remarks. Closing remarks will also be held to a 2-minute response. This will not be a debate. It is an opportunity for candidates to let voters know who they are and where they stand on certain issues. Thank you. Ready to begin?
Thank you, Zach. So each candidate, we're going to give you an opportunity to introduce yourself, talk about your candidacy, and what you offer to the residents of the Plymouth Norfolk District, as well as to the Commonwealth. You'll each have 2 minutes. We're going to start first with Mr. Gill.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Stephen Gill. I am a father, a veteran, and an attorney. I live in Marshfield, and I am the independent candidate for State Senate in the Plymouth and Norfolk District. 55% of Massachusetts registered voters are independent, which means I'm just like most voters. We are in the majority. The problem is every time we go to the voting booth, we're only given a choice between a Democrat or a Republican, and you hardly ever see an independent candidate on the ballot. And since the Massachusetts legislature is heavily controlled by the Democratic Party, and since 80 to 90% of elections in this state are uncontested, chances are when you go to the voting booth, you're only going to be given one choice, and that's going to be a Democrat. Fortunately, things are changing in Massachusetts. Currently, there are 2 independent representatives serving in the Massachusetts House, and this year, the number of independent candidates on the ballot across the state is up 50% from 2014. We've seen in recent years the problems that the two-party system has created in this country. Republicans and Democrats are fighting each other like cats and dogs. Instead of looking to work together like responsible people to negotiate compromises and to reach agreements that are in the best interest of the people, the party's candidates act like mortal enemies, and they're only interested in hurling personal insults at each other and promoting a my way or the highway approach to governance. The good news is that you'll have a chance to change all that by voting with the independent majority on November 6th. And by choosing me, Stephen Gill, as your independent state senator. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gill. And we're now going to be moving on to Dr. McBride. Dr. McBride, you have 2 minutes to tell us a little bit about yourself, your qualifications, and your reasonings for running for this office.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Katie McBride, and I'm running for State Senate. I'm a pediatrician, wife, and mom of 2 amazing kids. I've long been actively involved in the community. I'm a member of the Hingham Democratic Town Committee and an appointed member of the Massport Community Action Committee. I've given numerous free talks at the hospital and library. I've started a Saturday science program with a friend of mine to introduce children to the amazing accomplishments of women in science. Educating and giving to the community are passions for me. I've been endorsed by outstanding, influential people like President Obama, Governor Dukakis, and Gina McCarthy, former administrator of the EPA. I've also been endorsed by diverse and nonpartisan groups and unions like Planned Parenthood, UAW, and MassCop, which is the largest law enforcement union in Massachusetts. I have also been granted the Moms Demand Gun Sense candidate distinction. I am humbled to receive the support of so many people. I love being a pediatrician. I get to help families every day, and I'm honored to be able to listen to their concerns and help solve their problems. But our healthcare system is a mess, and it's rapidly worsening. 8 years ago, I gave birth to my son, and soon after that, we found out that he had hearing loss. So not only do I find myself as a mom of a patient looking at healthcare from the inside, but I also look at it from the outside as a physician taking care of my family. When he turned 5, we had the very exciting thing of getting him ready to go to a public school in kindergarten. And they knew going in that he had hearing loss, but it still took a year and a half for him to get the hearing aids that he needed to help listen in class. Our education system is not working for a lot of our children. And so we need to fix a lot of these things. There hasn't been a physician in the State House since 1936, and I think it's about time we had another one.
Thank you very much. And now moving on, Mr. O'Connor, you now have 2 minutes to introduce yourself and talk about your qualifications for this office.
Thank you. First off, I'd like to thank you, Donna and Zach and PAC TV for hosting this forum this evening. My name is Patrick O'Connor. For the past 2.5 years, I've had the honor and privilege of serving you as your state senator. Together, we've made the South Shore in Massachusetts the strongest it's ever been. On the state level, I worked with my colleagues in a bipartisan fashion to turn our economy around. Since taking office, we turned an $800 million deficit into a $1 billion surplus. We have created 110,000 new jobs in the Commonwealth, and we've invested in our children, our veterans, our seniors, our middle class, and infrastructure. And we put a compassionate but aggressive plan in place to tackle the opioid crisis. Right here in the South Shore, we've seen record levels of state aid for our schools, for our police, and for our fire departments. Public works and infrastructure projects such as the Route 3 Repair Bridge project, the seawalls in Situate, Marshfield, and hopefully in Duxbury, beach nourishment, and the Fall River Bridge are ongoing or have been completed. I've secured funds for a new school, senior centers, adult disabled housing, libraries, veterans houses, water infrastructure, and for local projects that have been long delayed or underfunded. And most importantly, my office has assisted thousands of constituents in need by providing a solution to their problem in their time of desperation, whether it be navigating the Real ID system that was created by the DOT or helping a family member find a bed for their son or daughter that night struggling with addiction. When people call my office, they know that they have somebody at the other end of the line who cares and wants to do everything they possibly can to help them. Working as your state senator is about finishing projects, producing results, and above all, helping people. And we're just getting started. I ask for your vote on November 6th to continue to work hard for you, to bring progress to the South Shore and our Commonwealth, and provide you the representation you deserve on Beacon Hill.
Thank you very much.
And thank you all again for being here. We're now going to move on to our first question. Our national politics has become a game of strategy and gridlock. Many elected officials appear to be making choices and casting votes based on party ideals, strategy, and personal beliefs versus speaking for the people who put them in office. As a representative of the Plymouth Norfolk District, what will influence your choices in voting and handling the business of our Commonwealth? How will constituent preferences impact your choices? And how will you remain connected to your constituents to understand their needs? We're going to start with Dr. McBride. You have 2 minutes.
Yeah, hi. So I think having a physician would be really helpful in our state senate for the reasons that you mentioned, because on a daily basis, what I do is I listen to people. And I think that's what we need to do, is we need to be listening to the people that elect us and the people that are in our community. And so I listen, and then I take the information that you've given me, and through years of experience and through looking at scientific studies, I help solve problems. So it's not just enough to listen, but you have to be able to solve problems. And I think that's a skill set that is really helpful, and I think that will be helpful in the state senate. I also take care of everybody. It doesn't necessarily matter what your politics are. I talk to everybody, and I listen to everybody's concerns. And so I think that will be really helpful, especially in this climate.
Thank you for your answer. Mr. O'Connor, the question to you, would you like the question repeated?
No, I think I have a firm grasp. I think what's going on in Washington, D.C. is a disgrace. I think that the partisan divide that we are experiencing right now is doing nothing but crippling the middle class and strengthening special interests. At a state level, for the past 2.5 years, I have tried to toe a line right down the middle and make sure that I take ideas as they come. They're not Republican ideas or Democrat ideas or special interest ideas to me. They're good ideas or they're bad ideas. And I think that that's something that we need to bring back to government because our democracy deserves it. Right now in Washington, D.C., we have people that literally just vote on party line, and that's something that we can't have continue. In Massachusetts, we've shown that we were able to work together with the Republican governor, with a strongly Democratic-controlled legislature, and produce results. And those results are what makes Massachusetts the standard-bearer state in this entire country. whether it be public education, where we rank the best, and if we were a standalone country, we would rank the 6th best of any of in the entire world. Our healthcare system, where we read about, and I agree with Dr. McBride, we absolutely need to make it more affordable. But when you read about people who are struggling throughout this country and throughout the world, they come to Massachusetts to get the health care that they deserve. How we treat our veterans, our seniors, those with intellectual and developmental disabilities, that is what's bringing Massachusetts forward. And all of the things that I hear from my constituents go into who I am as a person that goes to the state senate and casts that vote. I don't cast that vote for a party or for myself. I cast that vote on behalf of the 200,000 people that I represent. And being able to communicate with them, being able to hear their stories, hear their challenges, hear their dreams, hear their ambitions, hear what's going on in their neighborhoods and their communities, and then try and act on that to bring positive change to the South Shore is what I do every single day.
Thank you for your answer. Mr. Gill, now to you. I will repeat the question just for the viewers at home. As a representative of the Plymouth Norfolk District, what will influence your choices in voting and handling the business of the Commonwealth? How will constituent preferences impact your choices, and how will you remain connected to your constituents to understand their needs? You have 2 minutes.
Thank you. Yeah, this is a great question. This goes to the whole point of my opening statement with regard to being an independent. You hit the nail on the head. When you're talking about the toxic tribal politics that's going on at the national level, and we see this my way or the highway type of approach to governance. There's little to no cooperation going on between the parties, and this is what's wrong with the Democrats and the Republicans. The benefit to me, they're mortal enemies of each other, and they can't seem to come to an agreement with one another. Otherwise, for fear that they'll make their base think that they're soft on the opposing party. It's like a civil war going on at the national level. As an independent candidate, however, I have the benefit of being able to move in and amongst the parties because I'm not their mortal enemy. I can work with Republicans and Democrats alike, and they can actually work with me and come to agreements and consensuses with me because I'm not their mortal enemy. Now, how does this translate with regard to constituent services? The parties really stick to their party line, and what constituent services means is that they're doing political favors for people who have made contributions to their campaign or what the case may be in special interests. I am a veteran. I'm a combat veteran of Afghanistan and Kuwait. I've also served in other places around the globe. To me, if you're looking for constituent services and you're a veteran, I'm going to put you number one. I'm going to help you. If you have a disability, I'm going to help you. If you're elderly, I'm going to help you because you're the vulnerable people in our population who need and deserve that help. No one owns me but you, and I'll be there for you when you need me.
Thank you, Mr. Gill. Thank you very much. And we'll be moving on now to ballot question number 1. Question 1 on the November ballot is a law proposed by initiative petition. Question 1 asks voters if they support a law to limit how many patients could be assigned to each registered nurse in Massachusetts hospitals and specified healthcare facilities. This proposed law would take effect January 1st, 2019, and would carry potential fines for each day of violation of up to $25,000. This question appears to have created much confusion and debate across the Commonwealth. Proponents say this would improve patient care and outcomes in the Commonwealth as quality of care decreases dramatically when nurses are forced to care for too many patients at the same time. They state that this initiative also provides maximum flexibility by requiring hospitals to adjust the number of RN staffing levels based on the needs of patients alone. Opponents argue that question 1 puts patient care quality and safety at risk because it's a one-size-fits-all healthcare approach that enforces rigid government-controlled staffing ratios, taking control and judgment away from nurses and doctors who have boots on the ground. Additionally, they estimate it would cost more than $1 billion in additional health care costs annually. We'd like each of you to explain your position on this level and your interpretation of what its impact is on the Commonwealth. And we'll be starting first with you, Mr. O'Connor. You have 2 minutes.
Well, thank you. I support question 1. My mother is a NICU nurse at St. Elizabeth's Hospital, and ratios were put in place approximately 4 years ago for nurses that work in the NICU. So she's had patient ratios, and she's seen how it works, and she's seen how more nurses have actually been brought on to her unit since the point in time that they put that ratio in place. I understand that this is going to be the most hotly contested ballot question of this election cycle. And the Health Policy Commission recently released that it's going to cost approximately somewhere between $600 and $900 million. Boston College released estimates that had it much less than that. I think that the truth lies somewhere in between that, and that as a legislator, as a member of the state Senate, I think that once we start the process to implement question one, should it pass, that we need to look at some of the ratios that are in there, because even folks on the other side of the aisle that are no on one have come to me and said, we're no on one because it is a blanket approach, it's a one-size-fits-all approach, but even they agree that there has to be some ratios in place, that some nurses are completely stretched too thin. And I've heard stories from patients that have come to my office and told me that this one individual had a double lung transplant, said that his nurse had so many patients that there were points in times where she was just making it on time to give him the drugs that he needed for anti-rejection. And so there are some certain circumstances where we really need to take a long, hard approach at this and say, what can we do? And I think that question one is the proper first step to take, as far as making sure that we ensure patient safety, and also that our nurses that are working so hard and doing God's work are not stretched too thin and have the ratios that they deserve.
Thank you, Mr. O'Connor. I'm going to repeat the question. Question one asks voters if they support a law to limit how many patients could be assigned to each registered nurse in Massachusetts hospitals and specified healthcare facilities. Please explain your position on this issue and your interpretation of its impact on the Commonwealth. We'll go to you next, Mr. Gill. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you. Well, look, I'm the youngest of 9 children. I have 4 brothers and 4 sisters. One of my sisters is a nurse supervisor at Boston City Hospital in the maternity ward, and what she does all day long, and the other nurses in her unit, deal with drug-addicted babies that are born their first day on earth. They're addicted to these terrible opioids and other drugs that we're seeing that goes along with the opioid epidemic. I'm crystal clear on how I feel about this issue. I would vote no on this issue. Every hospital in Massachusetts opposes this question. The Massachusetts Medical Society, which is the oldest medical society in the United States, it was actually formed right here in Massachusetts a couple of days after Cornwallis surrendered to Washington at Yorktown, and they oppose it as well. The estimates that I've heard for this cost is that the startup cost for this in the first year is going to be $1.3 billion to implement, and thereafter it'll be $900 million a year. You know, we're having serious issues with funding medicine and our health insurance in this country, and in the state it is challenging as well. Why would we want to tack on a $1.3 billion cost to our healthcare system in year one, and then $900 million every year after? The American Nurses Association of Massachusetts and the Massachusetts College of Emergency Physicians also oppose this question. So I would urge voters to vote no.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gill. And I'll repeat it one more time. Question one asks voters if they support a law to limit how many patients could be assigned to each registered nurse in Massachusetts hospitals and specified healthcare facilities. Can you please explain your position on this issue and your interpretation of its impact on the Commonwealth? And now we'll go to Dr. McBride.
So first, I just want to say that I am voting yes on this ballot question, but I am sad that it made it to a ballot question because healthcare is very complicated, and this issue is very complicated. And so unfortunately, you are stuck with a yes or no answer to a complicated question. The reason why it made it to a ballot question is that unfortunately our legislature is not doing the stuff that the people of Massachusetts want them to do. The nurses have been going to them for years and saying, look, the hospitals are unsafe. What I'm doing is unsafe, and we really need help with it. And they've just been ignored. And so because they've been ignored, this is now a ballot question. I am voting yes on it because ultimately it will improve patient safety. As a pediatrician, your safety and your kids' safety and your family's safety is of the utmost concern for me. And I do believe that this will improve safety. I've worked in the hospitals. I've watched nurses have too many patients to take care of. I've seen medical errors happen because of this. So yes, we should improve safety, but unfortunately nothing's for free, so it will cost money. This is why I think it'll be really helpful to have a physician in your state house, because I've been in this environment, I have lots of experience with this, and I would like to work on this regardless of how this ballot question goes. If it's yes, awesome, right? But we still need to implement it in a safe manner that doesn't cost too much and doesn't close programs that people desperately need. And if it's no, we still need to listen to our nurses, because they're telling us the hospitals are not safe. And at some point or another, we're all going to find ourselves in the hospital, and I think we really want to be as safe as we can be.
Thank you very much.
For your answers now, I'm going to move on to ballot question number 2. Question 2 on the November ballot proposes a law that would create a 15-member Citizens Commission to consider and recommend possible amendments to the U.S. Constitution to establish that corporations do not have the same constitutional rights as human beings, and that campaign contributions and expenditures may be regulated. Proponents say passage of this question will advance an amendment to our Constitution that limits the influence of money in our elections, ensuring that all Americans have an equal voice in our democracy. Opponents argue this question is a challenge to our First Amendment right to free speech, and that courts have extended that right equally to all entities and organizations. They state that any proposed amendment to the Constitution related to this issue is dangerous and a threat to free speech. Campaign reform related to finance and advertising is a hotly debated issue. What are your thoughts, number 1, related to this ballot question, and number 2, on what should be done overall regarding campaign finance reform? We'll start with Mr. Gill. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you. Well, listen, as an attorney, and by the way, I'm not the only doctor up here. I have a doctor of jurisprudence. As an attorney, I can tell you, and I've studied the law and have practiced the law now for 23 years. I am a bit of a constitutional scholar. It's very disturbing, the rulings that have been coming out of the U.S. Supreme Court in the past several years with regard to trying to extend the Bill of Rights to corporations. There have been a number of cases, not just the Citizens United case, which this amendment is designed to deal with. And by the way, I'm voting yes on this. It's always a great idea to have people in the legal field taking a look at our law, our organic law, in the bigger picture in the Constitution, and see if we want to be able to propose amendments that need to happen. You know, in recent years, there's been other cases you probably heard about on television or what have you. The Baker case in Colorado. There's a baker who refused to bake a wedding cake for a gay couple who were getting married. And the Supreme Court ended up just saying that, well, this baker is a corporation, and they have a right to religious freedom. I don't know how a corporation has a right to religious freedom. A corporation doesn't even have a soul. But it's really being used as an excuse to discriminate against citizens and dance their way around the Equal Protection Clause, which is designed to have the laws of our government and our Constitution and the Bill of Rights apply to all of us equally. This is a great idea. I would encourage everyone to vote yes on this.
Thank you for your answer. We'll now move to Dr. McBride. First, I'll repeat the question. Question 2 proposes a law that would create a Citizens Commission to recommend possible amendments to the U.S. Constitution to establish that corporations do not have the same constitutional rights as human beings, and that campaign contributions and expenditures may be regulated. What are your thoughts, number 1, related to this ballot question, and number 2, on what should be done overall regarding campaign finance reform? You have 2 minutes.
So I am voting yes on this ballot question. Corporations are not people. When we elect our state senators and our House of Representatives and the people who represent us, it is we, people, who do that. And so I think that we need to take some of this corrupt money out of politics, and really it should just be the opinions of the people that matter. I will tell you, I have learned a lot running for state senate right now, and one of the least fun things is asking people for money, and the campaign finance part of the whole thing. It's great to just get in front of people. It's great to just knock on doors. It's great to just talk to people. And I think we need to do more of that rather than spending so much time getting in front of groups and trying to get money to pay for mailers and to do all that stuff. Because really it's about you. It is about the people of Massachusetts, and that's really what we should be focusing on. So I think having this commission is great because then we can work to fixing this problem, which is a pretty big problem.
Thank you for your answer. Question to you, Mr. O'Connor. Question 2 proposes a law that would create a citizens commission to recommend possible amendments to the U.S. Constitution to establish that corporations do not have the same constitutional rights as human beings and that campaign contributions and expenditures may be regulated. What are your thoughts related to this ballot question, and what should be done overall regarding campaign finance reform? You have 2 minutes.
Thank you. I support this ballot question, and during the last legislative session, I co-sponsored a call for a constitutional convention to bring up this exact subject. I thought that Citizens United was an absolute disgrace when the Supreme Court decided to rule in favor of corporations, to say that they had the same rights as human beings and that they had the same opportunities to donate to campaigns. As far as the second part of the question of what we can do about campaign finance, we have to do something. Right now, money is out of control in politics and people are buying votes. You see it day in and day out down in Washington, D.C., the big super lobbyists, all of the political action corporations, the 527 organizations, the super PACs, all of these things are combining together to promote special interests and not actually promote the interests of average, everyday human beings. And I think you can point to some of the things that haven't been accomplished, whether it be reforming healthcare at a federal level, whether it be college affordability. You know, it's an absolute shame that we are putting money, and so much of it, into our political system. What we need to do is we need to start a process of taking it out. I thought that McCain-Feingold, when that came along, was going to be the first step of many that America would take in order to slow the absolute influence of corporations on our democracy. But unfortunately, that didn't happen. And all we've seen now is just a complete reversal of that, where there's more money than ever before with very little limits on what people can spend or where people can contribute. Leadership funds for both the Republicans and the Democrats that people are donating hundreds of thousands of dollars to. It's a disgrace and it needs to end. We need to limit the money in politics.
Thank you for your answer. Donna?
Thank you. There are 78 coastal communities in the Commonwealth, and this includes the majority of the towns in the Plymouth and Norfolk region, or district, excuse me. Climate change is resulting in a triple threat to our coastline. 1, sea level rise, 2, worsening storms, and 3, aging infrastructure to protect our shorelines and our communities. It's estimated that there will be a 1-foot increase in the sea level along our coast in the next 20 years. Could you please talk to this issue, the work that's been done to date to support coastal infrastructure and resiliency, your thoughts about long-term plans and funding the work that will need to be done? We're going to start first with Dr. McBride.
So some of the things that we have started on is some short-term stuff, right? So we do have some seawalls up in some towns, but the problems with seawalls is that it is a short-term solution. You need it because we have to protect our houses and businesses that are along the coastline, but they're very expensive. So the lovely thing about scientists is they're always studying stuff, right? And so scientists have been looking at this problem for a very long period of time, and they have been coming up with lots of innovative ways. And I think we need to look at those studies, and we need to look at places around the country that have been doing similar stuff, because we're not the only ones that are dealing with this problem. And since you have so many smart people looking at it, we can take what they're doing and try to apply it into our towns. So some of the ideas is these things called wave attenuation devices, which are slightly cheaper than seawalls, so that may be a possibility. We've also been trying to put some sand on beaches in Marshfield and Hull to try to increase our natural barriers. So natural barriers are a longer term solution, and so I think we need to look at that. The problem with longer term solutions is it does take a little bit longer. So in order to help us as quickly as we can, we have to look at all these different approaches. And then we have to look at even the longest term approach, which is basically stopping climate change. And we have to do all the things that we can do in order to help our environment to allow it to heal. Some of those things can be not putting in horrible things like a compressor station. some of those things would be helping support better environmental bills. There was a really great environmental bill, but unfortunately it weakened, and so there were some things that weren't in it, and we need to look at those and put them back in, because we need all of the help that we can for the environment. And I think this, again, is another reason why it'd be very helpful to have someone with the strong science background that I have, to be able to read these studies, to be able to talk to people about it, and to be able to move faster on it.
Very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to repeat the question now. We'd like to ask you to talk to the issue of climate change and its impact on our coastline, the work that's been done to date to support coastal infrastructure and resiliency, your thoughts about the next best steps, long-term plans, and funding the work that will need to be done. Next, we're going to go to Mr. O'Connor. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you for the question. Working in a bipartisan fashion, I've been able to secure over $10 million for our seawalls and coastal infrastructure over the past 2.5 years, with another $6 million on the way through the environmental bond bill. I've lobbied down in D.C. for a fairer, more local-based approach to flood insurance, and I've also stood with the governor and spoke in Situate when he came down to announce his environmental bond bill, which included more money for coastal resiliency, as well as a MVP program which prepares our communities for vulnerabilities. Climate change is real. We see it each and every day, and especially here on the South Shore. What we experienced back in March, what we've experienced back in the 2.5 years I've been in office, has been pretty crazy. We've had the governor and lieutenant governor come down to Marshfield, to Situate, to other areas of the district to address and assess some of the problems and some of the damage that we've had after these storms. And I thank them for their leadership on this issue, and working with them, I think that we'll continue to make those investments that are needed right now. There's investments needed on our beaches in Marshfield and in Duxbury, and we've been able to work with Coastal Zone Management to secure over $500,000 in Duxbury for beach renourishment. And what we need to continue to do as well is keep an eye on what we can do to reverse the effects of global warming, what we as citizens can do, what we as a Commonwealth can do and as communities can do to make sure that everything is on the table when it comes to protecting our environment. I agree that our Earth is sick right now, and we need to do everything that we possibly can and act locally, think globally.
Thank you. And one more time, could you please talk to this issue of climate change and its impact on our coastline, the work that's been done to date to support coastline infrastructure and resiliency? I'm having a problem with that word tonight. Your thoughts about the next best steps, long-term plans, and funding the work that's going to need to be done. Mr. Gill, thank you for your patience with me.
Well, thank you, Donna. I know sometimes these questions can be a little bit wordy. It's a great question. Look, I've always said that the most important issue facing the Plymouth and Norfolk district, which is comprised of the towns of Weymouth, Hingham, Hull, Cohasset, Situate, Marshfield, Norwell, and Duxbury, is sea level rise. And you know, you had said initially that the sea level rise affects most of the district. However, it actually affects the whole district. All these towns are right on the coast. Now, Norwell is one town removed slightly inland, but it has the North River running right through it. So coastal flooding is going to be a real issue. You know, there was a study that was done, a tri-town study by the towns of Duxbury, Marshfield, and Situate in 2013, and at that time it said that we were due to have sea level rise in the next 25 years of 1 foot. Now, 5 years have come and gone, so in the next 20 years we're going to have a 1 foot sea level rise, which means that most of the a good chunk of the land comprises this district is going to start to go underwater. Water seeks its own level. I mean, Pat's dad's a plumber. I mean, and that's one thing that plumbers will always tell you is water seeks its own level. Now, we've spent over the years, you know, millions and millions of dollars putting up these seawalls and groins and weirs and other types of sea level rise revetment devices, and they just don't work. There are these cheaper options, wave attenuation devices, but all they do is stop the beach from being knocked down. It's not going to keep the sea level rise from coming. I promote a long-term approach whereby we do like the island of Nantucket has. They have a land bank, and in the land bank, they get a right of first refusal anytime anyone is going to sell a parcel of land, and they get to buy it back. So homeowners could have their, if we set up a land bank, they could have their homes bought out, and then the property could be left for open space.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. We're going to move on to our next question now. There are so many topics we could touch upon related to issue of importance in the Plymouth Norfolk district, from local aid to education funding and the formula used to determine funding, healthcare to the opioid crisis, and infrastructure to affordable workforce housing. We decided to make this question a candidate's choice. You each have 2 minutes to speak to issues you feel are of particular importance in the Plymouth Norfolk district and what you bring to the table to support growth and make positive changes to our community. We'll start with Mr. O'Connor.
Well, thank you for the question. I think that over the past 2.5 years, we've shown through effective, proven leadership what we're able to do with record level funding for Chapter 70, record level funding for our police and our fire. So when this is sort of a question that has multiple components to it, I'll talk to as many as I possibly can. The opioid crisis is something that is, in my opinion, the worst public health crisis that we've ever experienced in this country. And right when I got into office, the the STEP Act came into place that Governor Baker put forward, and that's now the national model. 45 states have either adopted it or said they're going to adopt something similar to what Governor Baker filed, and that was to limit prescription drugs to 7 days with caveats in a few areas for individuals with chronic pain who need these drugs. That has paid dividends, and after that we invested into a new 1,100 beds, treatment beds for individuals. And I think that this is one of the biggest issues that we face here on the South Shore. The South Shore has been hit really, really hard with the opioid crisis. It's one of the first reasons when I decided to run for office at 21 years old on the Weymouth Town Council, it was because I saw people that I went to school with who became addicted at that point in time to prescription drugs. It hadn't regressed yet to the heroin and now fentanyl that we see. But at that point in time, I said there has to be a solution to this. There has to be a way to solve this crisis. And since that point in time, in 13 years in the town of Weymouth, we put in an aggressive but compassionate approach to dealing with this problem. And I'm proud to say that numbers just came out in the Patriot Ledger a few weeks ago that showed that opiate deaths in Weymouth are down 90% and opiate overdoses are down 42%. I think that just goes to show that working together as a community, sitting at a table and having conversations and not arguments, leads to solutions. And the opioid crisis is one of those that we will continue to fight day in and day out until we bring this to an end, for our families, for those in recovery, and for those still struggling with addiction.
Thank you for your answer. Just a reminder, this is a candidate's choice. You have 2 minutes to speak to issues you feel are of particular importance in the Plymouth Norfolk district and what you bring to the table related to this issue to support growth and make positive changes in our community. Now go to Mr. Gill.
Thank you. Well, there are so many issues that are of importance to our district. Issues that I see, and when I talk to people and parents across the district, the importance of education. Pat just kind of touched on Chapter 70 has been broken for a long time. It's how we fund our public schools. The way the law was written, the Foundation Budget Review Commission was supposed to do a review every 4 years to tweak a formula that the way we get our public schools funded. And they haven't done that. In 2015, they did set forth 4 recommendations, which I won't go into the details because I'm trying to touch on several issues, but there were 4 aspects of the formula that they recommended to change. The Senate voted unanimously to adopt all 4 of those changes to the formula. The House voted to adopt all 4 changes, but they did it a little differently. They said they were going to adopt 2, and then they were going to do another study toward the other 2 factors. Pat was on that joint committee that sat and discussed this issue, but they couldn't quite resolve it. I would have loved to have seen if they could have come to a compromise and actually worked out that formula. But it didn't happen, and now the funding's going to be put off for yet another year. We need to, I oppose charter schools. Charter schools rob money from our traditional public schools and our VOTEC schools. We need to pump up our VOTEC schools. Not everyone needs to go to college. We need people in the trades. And we need to change the way the funding is right now for VOTEC. I'm pretty much out of time. One more issue I'd love to talk about is transportation. Route 3 is a mess. I could talk about that all night, but I see that I'm out of time, so I'll have to leave it at that.
Thank you for your answer. We'll go to Dr. McBride. Again, this is a candidate's choice. You have 2 minutes to speak to issues you feel are of particular importance in the district and what you bring to the table related to this issue to support growth and make positive changes in the communities. You have 2 minutes.
Healthcare is a mess. When I talk, knock on the doors, and I talk to my families, and I talk to people on the doors, I say healthcare is a mess, and everyone kind of laughs and says, "You think?" And I say, "Yes." And the thing about healthcare is it kind of finds its way into all sorts of things. It is one of the big costs in our education budget, and it keeps rising, and our education budget can't keep up with it. It is a big cost for businesses. It's a huge cost for families. Co-pays go up, deductibles keep going up. People are being crushed under the financial burden that our healthcare system is, and we need to fix it. We need to go to a more universal system. Massachusetts has really great health care, but it's not fair. And so that is one of the big things that I would like to push for. It is estimated that if we go to a universal system in Massachusetts, we can save $15 billion. And the way that we can save it is we can decrease administration costs, and we can argue for better prescription drug costs. And so I think we should. And I think this also touches on the opioid crisis that we have. Because not only as a physician have I taken care of patients that have had parents with drug addiction, or they themselves have had drug addiction. But since I've been a teenager, I've been helping my sister who has been addicted to drugs. And she's doing great right now, but I know how complicated it is to solve addiction, both personally and professionally, and we're just not doing enough to help families. We need to decrease the stigma. We need to start talking about it. We need to improve our education. We need to incentivize more healthcare professionals to learn how to medically manage it. There's so many ways that we can go about helping it, and we need to help people now.
Thank you for your answer.
Thank you very much. Sadly, many political campaigns and discussions have become increasingly negative in recent years. Instead of hearing about where a candidate stands on issues, more often we're inundated with negative advertising or comments about opponents throughout the election cycle. Whether this comes from the candidates themselves, their campaigns, or through social media, it becomes disheartening. So in the spirit of civil dialogue in elections, we invite you to talk positively about your opponents. You're each going to have 2 minutes to tell your opponents the strengths that you think each of them possess and the positive qualities you think they would bring to the people of Plymouth and Norfolk, as well as the Commonwealth if they're elected. Mr. Gill, we're going to give you the 2 minutes to speak to each of your opponents first.
All right, well, thank you. Listen, first I'll like to say thank you to Katie and her campaign. They have been great in sharing information with me, and I have been sharing information with them with regard to the various forums that we're all going to be participating in. That's the kind of reaching out to folks of either a different political party or someone like me who's unenrolled in a political party as an independent. This is what I was talking about in my opening statement. We've touched on this throughout this forum, you know, the whole idea of the tribal politics that's going on and the infighting and the my way or the highway. And I just want to say thank you, Katie, and to your campaign. You've been great, you know, and with the cooperation. Obviously, you're a physician, you're highly educated, you would bring a lot to the table. If you were to be elected, you know, I myself, you know, I'm an attorney as well. I have a lot of education as well. And I think in that regard, Katie and I, you know, would both bring good things to the table. With regard to Pat, I want to commend Pat for his long public service throughout his young life. You know, he was a counselor in the Weymouth City Council for many years, and he was there as a young man. And then he rose to the level to become a state senator, giving back his public service. I too, just like Pat, have been in public service my whole life. I just retired from the Navy JAG Corps, Navy and Navy Reserve, as Lieutenant Commander after 23 years. I retired last year. I've also previously served at the Massachusetts Department of Veterans Services. So, you know, veterans, you know I have your back. I was the Deputy Secretary and General Counsel up at that level. I understand how state budgets work and how the sausage is made. I also was a Special Assistant U.S. Attorney in Florida. So, you know, Pat and I both have been in public service for many years.
We appreciate your answer. Dr. McBride, it's going to next be your opportunity to talk to each of your opponents, talking about the strengths that you think they possess and the positive qualities you think they will bring to the Plymouth Norfolk District, as well as the Commonwealth if they are elected. You have 2 minutes.
Yeah, first I would like to say thanks. Both of you guys have been really great and very nice. I will say this has been a really nice campaign. I think that, there really hasn't been any fighting. I think we've all done a really great job of just saying what we believe in and talking about that. So for Pat, thank you for talking with me. I've actually lobbied him before I decided to run for politics, and he sat and listened to me, and it was very nice. And I think there are things that we don't agree on, but there are lots of things we do agree on, and we've always ever talked nice to each other, and that's been great. And then I want to say thanks, Stephen, because you reached out, and I think it's good to be able to have this open dialogue. I think it's also great that you're independent and you give people another option. I wish we had ranked choice voting. That's my plug for ranked choice voting, because that would give more options in voting, which is what we need. But it's been very nice and pleasant, and I think if all campaigns were run like this, people would like it a lot more.
Well, that's good to hear. Thank you, Doctor. We're going to be moving on to Mr. O'Connor next, and this is your opportunity again to tell your opponents the strengths you think they possess and the positive qualities that you think they would be able to bring to the district as well as the Commonwealth if they're elected. You have 2 minutes.
Well, it's a fantastic question, and I agree with you as far as there's way too much negativity in politics. To start with Steve, this is, I think, the third time officially that we've run against each other. Steve's a spirited opponent, a great lawyer, a veteran. I know some people who have served with him. One of the people that I served with, Mike Rush, Senator Mike Rush out of West Roxbury, knows Stephen well. I know that he doesn't promote this often, but Stephen actually performs services, funerals, folding the flag and doing things like that for our fallen heroes. So I think that's something that is really special and unique about Steve. Katie, I met her back, Dr. McBride, I met her back in January of 2017 when she was lobbying on a specific amount of bills, and she actually swayed me. We didn't agree on all the bills that day, but she swayed me on a couple of bills, and I became the only Republican to co-sponsor in the Massachusetts state legislature, not even just in the Senate. And so I think that she brings a passion and a different approach and a different skill set that I think is going to, or could serve the community very well. I think that what she does inside of the community with the science classes that she's able to teach and bring people engaged of all ages into the knowledge and experience and background that she has is something that is really important. And I think, again, this is something that should be promoted more often in the world that we live in now, because it seems that everything's a hit piece or a social media attack or something along the lines of what you see every single day in the news or in DC, and that doesn't happen here in Massachusetts, and it certainly doesn't happen here in the South Shore. We respect each other. We have a large amount of respect for each other, and it's a good thing.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you for your comments. We're now going to give you 2 minutes for closing remarks. Feel free to speak directly to the camera to address your voters and constituents. We're going to start with Dr. McBride.
I would like you to vote for me because I will bring a new set of skills and a more progressive set of ideas to the State House. As a physician, I care about you and your family. I will listen to your concerns and use scientific evidence to solve our problems. I will work for a more universal healthcare system. I will attack our opioid epidemic from all angles to help our families and communities. I will work towards high-quality, affordable education for all, from pre-K through college or trade school, and accessible, reliable, and affordable public transportation. I will continue to support our working families, promote gun safety, and defend the civil rights of all Massachusetts residents. I will use scientific evidence to protect our environment. I need you to vote for me, Katie McBride, and together we can write a prescription for change.
So, Mr. O'Connor, you'll now have 2 minutes for closing remarks.
Well, thank you again, Donna and Zach and PAC TV for hosting us this evening. It's been an honor and a privilege to be able to serve as your state senator. Whether it be the $8.4 billion we invested in transportation over the next 4 years, working hard to tackle the opioid crisis, holding the line on taxes, $300 million, over $300 million brought back to the district since taking office on May 18th, 2016, or the $2 billion we recently put into a bond bill for environmental protection. We've done a lot of great things. I want to continue to work with Governor Baker and my colleagues in a bipartisan fashion to advance our shared priorities. Those shared priorities of great schools for our children, and trades or affordable college after. The best services and programming for our seniors, our veterans, and our intellectually and developmentally disabled. Making healthcare more affordable, growing our economy, creating jobs, and making sure Massachusetts and the South Shore's best days are always ahead of us. I ask for your vote on November 6th to continue to work for you and provide you the representation you deserve on Beacon Hill. Thank you.
Mr. Gill, you have 2 minutes for your closing remarks now.
Thanks, Zach. Thanks, Donna. Thanks to PAC TV for sponsoring this candidates forum. Thanks to Katie and thanks to Pat for participating. Again, my name is Stephen Gill. I'm the independent candidate for State Senate. One of the overarching themes that we've been talking about throughout this entire forum tonight is the idea of what we see at the national level with this toxic political tribalism and the my way or the highway approach to governance. And the Democrats and Republicans seem to be each other's mortal enemy, and they really don't want to work with each other, is what we see. As an independent state senator, I'll have the advantage of being able to work with both Democrats and Republicans because I'm not their mortal enemy. They can agree with me freely without being seen to their base as selling out to their mortal enemy in the other party. I guess I lost my train of thought there for a second, but in any event, on November 6th, you're going to have a chance to vote against the all this toxic political tribalism that we have. Independent voters are the majority of voters in Massachusetts. We comprise 55% of registered voters. I'd encourage you to vote with the majority of independent voters on November 6th and choose me, Stephen Gill, as your independent state senator. I haven't been doing any fundraising. I'm not taking any money from anybody. A few people gave me a few dollars and I accepted it so as not to insult them. But I'm not taking any money from special interest groups or anybody else. If you elect me as your state senator, the only one who will own me is you, and I'll be there to put your needs ahead of the political parties and ahead of special interest. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you all for participating in this forum with us this evening. We wish you all the best of luck throughout your campaign and in the election. For our viewers, thank you for joining us. If you're interested in watching replays of our forum, please visit our website, pactv.org/elections, for replay times and viewing options, including PAC TV's streaming service, PAC TV Prime. And please make your choices heard by voting in the general election on Tuesday, November 6th. Thank you.